This is the Elevate Construction Podcast, delivering remarkable content for workers, leaders, and companies in construction wanting to take their next step. Get ready to step out of your comfort zone with Jason Schroeder as he encourages you to do better, live a remarkable life, and expect more. Let's go.
Welcome to the Elevate Construction Podcast, where we try to stretch you, the listener. My name is Jason Schroeder, and today's podcast is about urgency. So I will give you a quote that I love that is near and dear to my heart from General George S. Patton, which is, "A good plan violently executed today is better than a perfect plan next week." And that's again by General Patton. And I believe this is so important to the life of a superintendent that we're doing a podcast, a Build a Little Better podcast today that will hopefully help you and anyone you mentor understand the importance of urgency in construction and in warfare. So the reason I mention warfare is that long waiting always exposed workers, in our case, but soldiers for them, to enemy fire and to longer durations of that enemy fire, which led to casualties. And our workers, when we are delaying things, are exposed to more waste, to weather, to damage, to things like that, to things similar in construction that could be likened to enemy fire in war. So the rapidity of our advance, meaning how rapidly we advance, how rapidly and urgently we move forward, determines our success. Just like in war, the rapidity or the rapidness or the rapid pace with which an army would move forward would reduce the duration of time that our soldiers are exposed to enemy fire. So that's really the concept, is that we have to move forward, because every time we slow down, we are exposed to more waste, to delays, to damage, to weather, to changes, to a number of different things. So urgency is absolutely amazing. So let me tell you a story. There was once a time when I was in charge of a project, and the first wall placement was done incorrectly. That first wall placement, when the forms came off, there was honeycombing everywhere. There was bad consolidation. It looked horrible. I mean, this wall just looked absolutely horrible. There were a couple of people that said, hey, let's ask the engineer. That may have been the right response, so I'm not being critical about that. There were some people that said, hey, can we patch it? There were some that said, let's just get that darn thing down. And I remember calling a really trusted builder, a friend of mine, and asking for advice. And he said, Jason, get that wall down now. Go, if you know for a fact that it's not going to be up to the level of quality that the owner expects, to our reputation, and it's the right thing to just take it down, call the demo company, get them out there tomorrow, get that wall down, and get it cleared out by the weekend so that you can start forming it again on Monday. And I thought to myself, wow, that is amazing. Usually I would take time to think about it. We'd get a second opinion. We'd look at it. We'd do some testing. And by that time, we would have been, if I had made that decision, 2 to 3 weeks down the road. And I remember some of the great leaders on the project saying, hey, give us just a couple of hours or at least a day to just do a little bit of research here. And if it proves that it's the right decision, we'll get it down now. And that's what they did. Super proud of their decision and what they did. That wall came down immediately, formed it back up, never missed a beat on the schedule, because there was a sense of urgency, because there was a sense of do quality from the start, quality at the source, fix things as you go. Don't push that down to the customer. And if we know those things, and we are a principle-based organization, we are principle-based leaders, we base our decisions on principle-based leadership characteristics, then we'll just go ahead and move in that direction and do the right thing. Now, let me say a couple of things. And you know me, hopefully you're used to me on these podcasts. I'm here for personal development and to get people to actually implement the things that we're talking about that would be beneficial for their career. If somebody said, do I personally saying hard things? No. Do I like hearing myself talk? Not necessarily. I do love doing these podcasts. I love giving talks. I love speaking. Do I do this for fame and glory? No. The podcasts are free. This is free content. So my intention here is to give the best information, the best data, the best education, the best resources available to benefit everybody's individual careers, because my mission, and maybe it's my naivete, is that we can change the industry, make it to where families are protected, workers are respected, and that everyone that listens to these podcasts can continually and progressively be more and more successful, fulfilled, and make more money. And if I'm going to do that, and that is my intention, and that's my purpose, and I really do believe that, and I hope you do as well, then I'll say hard things. A superintendent without urgency, a project manager without a sense of urgency, and people in the field, foremen without a sense of urgency, they really are fairly useless. What I mean by that is this: it would almost be better off if we didn't have that person in that position and everybody assuming that he or she is taking care of their business than it would to have them in that position. Meaning that a person in a leadership position without urgency is taking on responsibilities and being counted on to do certain things without urgency, which is just pushing us behind. And that is worse than just not having that position and having other people come in and fill the gap, cover for that person and take care of those responsibilities if they have urgency. So to me, a supervisor without urgency is fairly useless. They let things get behind. They let the trades run all over them. They have to be reminded all the time. They don't protect the stability of the project site, so they punish the A players by allowing the F players to run rampant all over the project site. So I'll give you a couple of examples without mentioning names, without mentioning companies, or without mentioning projects. And even if you think you can guess where they are, you can't. So let me just give you a couple of them. There was once a superintendent that I was helping and overseeing. I was the general superintendent, and he was a superintendent on the project. And we had set up some fantastic systems. We had the meeting structure implemented. We had zero tolerance implemented. We had great field engineering on the project. It was all set up. There was a great schedule. I mean, everything was just top notch. And when I came back to the project after giving it some time, a lot of times I'll leave for a little bit and create a vacuum and see how people do. That's just a part of me making sure that nobody's depending on me so that I can be a good leader, right? Because wimpy leaders are always needed there on the project site, and they never delegate, teach, or enable other people to do things when they're gone. So the measure of a good leader is to go away for a little bit and let the team do it themselves and get credit themselves. And so I'm always measuring myself by that guideline and trying my best to be a good leader. So I went away for a little bit, and when I got back, safety wasn't going very well, and half of the meetings had been abandoned, and zero tolerance was not implemented anymore. And there was just a lot of things that weren't going well. We had lost some days on the schedule, and it really came down to urgency. And he wasn't being successful. So had the candid feedback, brought some other people in on the team, and created a structure to where there was some team accountability there to implement the job, to drive the job in a way that there was urgency. So one of the things that I noticed, and I've mentioned this before, is that we can set up a project really well in pre-construction. We can give the project team enough time, enough money, enough of the information. Heck, we can even go, have the estimating team write all of the contracts, get everything ready to go. Maybe procurement is well underway. And that team will continue to fall behind because of a lack of urgency. So even if we plan a good project in pre-construction, we have to have leaders with urgency. We have to get out of the ground quickly. We have to do those things. Okay, so here's another example. There was an assistant superintendent way back that was running the interior scope of a building, large building. And again, there wasn't a sense of urgency, and he was being wimpy with the trade partners and not holding on to standards. The overall lead superintendent had to come and really help him and try and help him to succeed and constantly do things for him. And there was a lot of training, a lot of support, a lot of coaching. And after a while, it still wasn't working. And there was another assistant superintendent with urgency, and we were able to make that switch. And within a day, listen to me, within a day, the entire project succeeded because you have the systems, you have the support, you have the schedule, you have the team, you have the dynamic team. But that one person with a lack of urgency was making it to where every time you walked, it was unclean. Every time you walked, they didn't know what was going on. We were falling behind schedule. Meetings were wimpy and they weren't being run well. Trade partners were running all over the place and things were in chaos and out of control. And then you put in a superintendent or a leader in one of those situations with urgency, and it changes within a day. You have to have that urgency. You have to have that drive, that passion, and moving things forward. It's the key. And I will note that is an example of that one person was counted on to do their job, to succeed on that project, and everyone else was letting them do it. And so the best thing was to remove that person, let that other assistant superintendent come in and take over, and then at least you knew, even if that new assistant superintendent was a little bit stretched, you knew that they would drive with urgency and that they would communicate problems. This also happened to me. When I was an assistant or an area superintendent, the general superintendent came over and said, Jason, you're now in charge of this area, and took it away from somebody else. And it's because I was driving, I was planning, I was pushing, and the other person was just waiting for this perfect plan. And he would even say, oh, you can't send out early revisions of this plan. You have to wait till it's perfect. You have to wait. I'm still looking at drawings. I'm still. And I sound a little bit critical. I don't mean to be that way, but the point was the overthinking, the hesitance or the hesitancy there, the reticence in meetings. These things were holding him up from driving and getting a good plan implemented immediately versus a perfect plan next week, which again exposes our workers to waste and variation the longer they're exposed to that delay. Give you another example. There was another superintendent that just would not have this sense of urgency and implement authoritative zero tolerance. And so when I went out there, 3/4 of the project was remarkable. The site was remarkable. Central plant was remarkable. All of the main podium floors were remarkable. And this one section of the building it was like you switched over into a different world. It was messy. It was unsafe. We weren't on schedule. And again, that was another example of he was being a wimpy leader without drive, without passion, without a sense of urgency. And the thought was to support him with some field engineers to get some standard systems. And those systems started to work a little bit, but he took it too far. He overcompensated with the fear and the lack of urgency by just yelling at trade partners and telling them that they needed to go do what I was telling him to do. And he really ruined some relationships. So again, after months and months and months of trying and enabling and teaching, again, this person had to be removed. The superintendent on the other floors, who was still in charge of those other floors, came in, and it changed literally within 32 hours. It was amazing. And actually consider this. I, as a person that sells consulting and coaching and organizational health training, I'm admitting on a podcast that I have been unable to help and coach certain individuals. And that's kind of risky for me because that's my source of income, right? That's one of my sources of income. But I'm telling you this and admitting that a person without a sense of urgency, a person without passion, a person that cannot drive and implement, that cannot get out of their comfort zone and move into the learning zone and actually speak up and hold people accountable, you cannot do anything with those people. Those are the people, the 5% that you just have to say, hey, this isn't working. Let's get you in a company or a situation or in a role where you can succeed. So that's the key. And I need you to hear me on this. The other thing is, I'm actually going to skip down in my outline here a little bit. There's a quote that I wrote down, and it says this: self-help resources either provide you with ideas to find your passion or encourage you to pursue your passion, but none of them can create passion. It only comes from within. And I believe that. When we do boot camps, we have like a 60 to 80% success rate for certifications, meaning people that will actually go make a difference. The people that are choosing to not finish their certifications, that's their decision. It comes from a lack of urgency, a lack of passion, a lack of commitment, right? if they're choosing that and they have their agency and everyone has their agency, there's nothing that can be done. And while boot camps have a higher percentage success rate for change at 60%, where most trainings are like 5 or 10, most immersion events are like at 30%, and most people hover around an average of 20% aggregated total, boot camps will produce a 60% success rate. Even that, though, I have to mention that it's the people where there's this lack of passion, this lack of urgency. So I'll say that again. Self-help resources either provide you with ideas to find your passion or encourage you to pursue your passion, but none of them can create passion. It only comes from within. And that is 100% true. That is absolutely true. So let me talk about a couple of examples to help us and you see what I mean by urgency. So there was a project that was getting a little bit behind schedule, and the director asked for some help, and this person giving help suggested, hey, you need to put this phase of the project on a night shift and do it immediately. And the team kind of hem-hawed around and waited and, was finding excuses for why this couldn't happen. And by the way, this has happened multiple times. And after a while, the person giving help was like, you're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. I'm telling you, if you need to make up time, you need to do it right now. So that finally lit enough of a fire under everybody to where they went out, had the conversations, got the shift work going, and they were able to pick up a month on the schedule. Here's another example. There was a foreman on a project that was being destructive in meetings, just this cancerous negative behavior, and it was affecting everybody. Meetings were disrespectful. It was just a horrible garbage situation. And I said, we need to remove that foreman. And so there was some hemming and hawing around like, hey, we don't want to do that right away. What about this? What about that? And I finally said, if you guys want to get this project back on track, you need to get rid of this foreman. They need to go to another project where they can be successful. And they did it. And within days, the environment got better. So the other one, I'll just briefly go over these because we don't have a lot of time here. But the other one, there was a superintendent that was heading to recover a project, and it took him like 3 months to redo the schedule. And the advice was get that schedule redone in a couple of days, at the most a week, so you know your path to finish. And it took him months and months and months, and eventually somebody else had to take over and do that work. I've already given you the example before of a superintendent who was taking too long to do the planning and the thinking and the coordination, and I was able to take over his work. So here's just one little story. There was a real close friend of mine, a great builder, who was walking with one of his field engineers, and he noticed a 2x4 up on a beam. It's like 18 feet up in the air, and he pointed to his field engineer and said, hey, we need to get that out. And then on another walk later on that week, mention it again. Next week, mention it again. And then finally, the superintendent in front of the field engineer called over one of the really good craftspersons and said, hey, I need that 2x4 down. Can you make it happen? And within 45 minutes, that 2x4 was down. And the superintendent said to the field engineer, do you see what I'm talking about? You need to drive, you need to have some urgency, and you need to get it done. So I'll mention a couple things before we're done here. In the book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, they mentioned that keeping too many things on a to-do list will be detrimental to your health and will increase your stress. If there's an ability to get something done now, do it, because then you don't have to worry about it and stress about it. So get it done now. You cannot wait. So this applies to construction in a couple different ways. Get out of the ground quickly. Get your plan out quickly. Remember, a good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan next week. Make sure that you are holding trade partners accountable, that you have an urgency about correcting things on site, that you have a sense of drive, and that people feel gently pushed to follow your example and do those things that are critical for you to accomplish. And don't wait too long to make the plan, right? You cannot wait. So hustle is the main word here. Hustle is what's going to get you to where you want to be. And hustle, your actions, how you move, how you think, how you talk, how you drive, how you lead will communicate that urgency. I'm thinking right now about a clip in the movie Patton. And by the way, and I'll talk about this later in one of our War Series podcasts, that General Patton in the movie Patton goes up to a commander and said, I need you to that beachhead, get through that beachhead in 4 hours. And he started to give a number of excuses, and he said, you're fired. Looked at another person, the officer second in command, and said, what's your name? Got his name and said, now you're the commanding officer and you need to get through that beachhead in 4 hours or I'll fire you. And I remember that scene, and now I wouldn't act that same way, but the sense of urgency should be the same, mixed with proper leadership techniques, right? So there was another scene where they were trying to cross a ford or river, and the General Patton was screaming from the other side of this thing and saying, "What are you guys waiting for?" And the commanding officer said, "We're trying to find a place to cross." He was like, "I already did that. It's 100 yards down there. Let's get going and put your helmet on." And he was leading from the front to create that sense of urgency so that people would get going and stop waiting and stop making excuses and stop living in this siloed world where they weren't held accountable to the things that they needed to do. So if you ever really want to use a movie to help superintendents for good and bad examples, I suggest that you watch the movie Patton. Most of the movie shows good examples, and then when he slaps soldiers and acts a little bit inappropriately, that's also something that happens to superintendents, and those can be used as examples of things not to do. So, a couple more things. This also can be reflected in how you respond to things. I remember there was one time where on my project there were a couple of safety incidents, safety issues that were happening, and there's this messaging system that we would use to communicate that to the entire company. And after a couple of them, I sent this detailed email with immediate action saying, "This is our immediate plan, this is what we're going to do, we'll return a report in a couple of days." And I got some feedback on that kind of response was remarkable. And then this same thing happened with a different person. A couple of incidents started to happen, and I'm not even going to tell you what they are. First aids were a part of what we're talking about, just little simple things that if they were going to continue, they could have become bigger. This was messaged around because the company cared, and they didn't respond. And I was just taking note of the fact that the impression there is that there isn't a sense of urgency. There isn't a sense of care there to go take care of it. And so people had to go talk to that team to get them to do what was right. And that's very, very bad. So as a leader, you need to also verbally communicate your sense of urgency to everyone else. So in closing, energy moves everything. Your personal energy, your approach, when you pull your shoulders back, you put your head up and put your 100% into something, your passion, why you're at work. If you hate coming to work on Monday mornings, then you're probably in the wrong job. You should consider doing something else. But if you have passion, you love what you do, get your shoulders up, put your head high, and go out there and give it 110%. Because energy and passion drives and moves everything. And one more time with this quote: self-help resources either provide you with ideas to find your passion or encourage you to pursue your passion, but none of them can create that passion. It only comes from within. So the reason this is important to me is because countless times over and over, I've seen people get terminated, written up, or punished for not having this passion, this drive, this enthusiasm, this sense of urgency. And so I would suggest find someone with passion and drive and emulate them. Pattern your life, your career, your actions after them. Remember that wall example that I gave you? I called a very close friend who has this amazing sense of urgency and asked for advice. Go somewhere, go be in the places where there's passion. I personally go do Tony Robbins events every year to get that passion, to boost me back up. I listen to good podcasts, good music. I have key songs that will get me where I need to be. I have a purpose for my work. I have those 3 things that every employee needs, and I just go get it done because I know that passion moves everything. Drive moves everything. A sense of urgency gets everything done. And so the vision for this would be that you're able to go find your passion, and live a remarkable life and be successful at work, because without passion, you can go nowhere. And I hope this helps. Until we meet again, let's go find that passion. Let's think about it. Let's go get that music. Let's go get those trainings. Let's go get that mentor. Let's go do something where you can find out how you can get that back in your life if it's gone. And remember the book Switch. Go find the hot spots. When did you in your life have this sense of urgency? When did you in your life have that passion? When did you have that drive? Go back to that place and maybe use that as a model to move forward. Until we meet again, on we go.
Please join us next time in elevating the entire construction experience for workers, leaders, and companies coast to coast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to share with your construction colleagues and help us spread the word by rating, subscribing, and leaving a review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate it. We'll catch you next time on the Elevate Construction Podcast.